as I listened to that clip from Eckler, it reminded me yesterday that while he was talking and I was trying to put out some updates on social media, I spent like 3 or 4 minutes trying to figure out the correct spelling for his A, and and what it actually meant in terms of like
Not even gonna kid you. I said it
the
out loud to
language.
myself, slow, like what?
If I had to
His
guess,
a
I'd go Hizzay.
his
Yeah,
a.
I think that's probably right, but I couldn't find any actual references to it on the internet, so I left it out. I didn't go with it. It's a good quote. It's a good soundbite though.
Mitch, I'm only asking you because I kind of know your personality. I know how you'd hold me accountable. I know you'd roll your eyes at me and couldn't care less about my reaction. So,
Okay.
would Mitch Sherman tell me to get off my soapbox and stop crying because I was a little put off by the reaction to all the adjectives that Coach Eckler used during his presser, right? The weapon and like not lowering the expectation, but maybe raising it even as a coach. Like we didn't know how to handle that as receivers of the information. Would you just be like, come on, man, it's normal, it's how the fan base is? Or would you say, oh, you know what, you kind of got a point?
Well, you might have to explain to me a little bit more, like what kind of
It just,
reaction you felt, because
I,
I
I I felt like we missed. We didn't eat the meat and spit out the bones, right? We just hung on to the fact that he said a guy could be a weapon. We kind of took it and ran, and it's like, can we just play a game yet? Or we're not
oh
there, or
yeah.
you got all this feedback, and I'm like, it, it's
There's
okay.
a lot of that. There's a lot of that this month.
Oh,
And
so you
I
would encourage. I'm okay, right? You're not gonna like. That,
well, I I just think it comes with the territory. Like you have to you have if you haven't figured out by now that there are going to be people out there who, no matter what is said in the lead up to a season, especially as we get close to the season now, you get some of this like in March and April, like just play a game. Well, you can't play a game in March. Like it's not on the schedule. So,
I can.
and you know what? Like Nebraska football is this machine that is going to just move on and go on. And there's this whole big media horde and thousands or tens of thousands of fans who follow it. And there's going to be hyperbole and there's going to be these adjectives. There's going to be descriptions. There's going to be hype. There's going to be stuff that like seems silly. And then some of the reaction, inevitably, you can't do anything about it, is going to be, I don't want to hear it. Just go out and win a game, show it on the field. And I've come to just kind of accept that as like, that's what it's going to be. It's not like this chorus of people saying that who represent the majority of the Nebraska fandom. If that was the case and I felt like everybody had that attitude and nobody wanted to hear any of the buildup, like it's just inevitable. You're going before the season starts, you're going to talk about things related to the team. Like we're not just going to be quiet and say nothing until they play a game. You're going to make predictions. You're going to hear what the coaches have to say. Like we've built this thing to this point. You can't put that back in the bottle. So yeah, I'm fine with you being a little bit agitated by that. I am too. But my take on it is I just I just accept it and know like that's normal. There's lots of annoying things out there
Can I give you the
in the
context of what
world, and
really
this is
set
just
me
one of them.
off?
Yeah, go ahead.
Was the cynicism and snark from like years past of can't we just snap the ball? Like,
Oh
how
yeah,
are you dumb enough to kick it to the wrong hash? Or
yeah, like
you
that's not
can't
this team.
even line up and kick a field. So when you hear the antithesis that you may actually be able to do that, like we don't like that either. And
Mm-hmm.
the big thing about it is, Mitch, not really knowing Archie, but kind of knowing a little bit about him, and he's in
Mm-hmm.
that room
Mm-hmm.
like as in a position of leadership, a lot of what Eck was saying it probably wasn't for us, right? It might have been for Arch. You know what I mean?
Or all the guys on special teams. I mean, yeah, when he was
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
specifically about Archie,
yeah.
I mean, Rhule does that a lot, and he's talking to the players when he's actually talking to the media. He's actually talking to the players, or maybe he's talking to somebody on his staff. Like that's fine. And that's an effective tool. Yeah, I I think with Eckler, like this is that's his personality. Like that's what it's going to be. He's going to have a lot of bluster and as long as the team's buying into it, that's all that matters. I think the players do buy into him, and he's a unique creature for sure. And we heard yesterday about how he's got an office down by the weight room, like a second office, which is just like so uniquely Mike Eckler. Like, why'd you do that? Well, I felt like I needed to have some place to be where I was closer to the players. Okay, like yeah, that makes sense when you listen to him talk. I understand it somewhat from the fans' perspective. Like they've been drugged through the mud so much over the years that it sometimes becomes difficult to separate the reality that this team is different, and like all teams are different. And just because Nebraska struggled with the field goal operations last year or 4 years ago, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen this year. There's different personnel, there's different coaches, there's a different mindset. Like sometimes I even struggle with it when I'm thinking about like, okay, what should be like my public opinion on this football team, because I look at the team like out there at practice yesterday and hearing the things that they've had to say. And I'm not living in a globe, like in a bubble where like the windows are so tinted that I can't see out. Like I was at Big Ten Media Days. I talked to 17 other teams from the Big Ten. I've been around the country and in football camps in the SEC and in other places. Like I realize, and I think a lot of people do, that other teams out there have great players too. And just because Nebraska has an offensive guard who's 6'5" and 320 pounds and looks like he could be in an NFL camp, like that doesn't necessarily mean that you should say Nebraska is going to win 10 games, because that guy is on other campuses too, all over the Big Ten. So you have to like understand the perspective. But the bottom line is, when I look at this team and when I hear people, when I hear the players talk, and when I hear what the coaches have to say and I see them at practice, like I trust what my eyes are telling me. Like I'm not taking into account like what happened in 2019. I understand this is a good football team. Now, can they go execute and win 9 games? We'll see. There's a lot of other variables that come into play.
See, Mitch, you brought something up there that I think is really important, and that's that the evaluation of, hey, this is a good football team, which we've heard from Coach Rhule a little bit last year, a little bit this year, and what that actually looks like in wins and losses is not necessarily as linear as we would like it to be, right? Like there, to your point, there's other good teams in the Big Ten. There's other, and just because I think they're going to win 10 games doesn't mean you think they're going to win 10 games. Doesn't mean Coach Rhule thinks they're going to win 10 games. Like we don't really know what that means necessarily. I think it's a starting point of, hey, we have players that are good enough to execute at a level to win here. Now we just have to go do that. And I don't know that we always bridge that gap as kind of fans and media.
Sure. Yeah, it's easy to get carried away and just assume that like a team that looks the part is automatically going to then achieve the kind of success that you would expect when you get to the season. And that's there are injuries, there are team dynamics, there's all kinds of, good breaks, bad breaks, luck is a part of it. And I'm sure Mike Eckler would say, we don't believe in luck. We create our own luck, go out there and be men, all the kind of, that's just him. And it's probably good to have like that guy on the staff who just takes that hard line stance, and then have others on the staff who, who handle how you deal with expectations in a different kind of way. Like he's hardcore. Like there's no doubt about that. And we heard all of it on Tuesday. But then there are other coaches on the team, like Matt Rhule takes a different approach to some of that stuff, and it's good for the players to have a variety of voices to hear, and like they can adopt whatever philosophy they want. Like it's every player has his own journey on how he's going to get to the peak of his own ability. But yeah, I mean, there's a big gap to bridge. You're right, Ravi, between looking like a successful Big Ten team when you're on the practice field and then going out and achieving that in November when the season is on the line over a 2-game stretch.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because there was a little bit of a reference yesterday from Coach Snow where he said, I kind of feel sorry for Terry because Coach Rhule's a D-line guy, right? And so he's going to spend some time having some input with D-line. And I thought about that in its totality, right? Where if I'm a coach, and he said it again with Coach Butler, where he can't pay attention to everything. So sometimes we'll do this. There's actually, in my opinion, there's comfort in that as in the hierarchy. If I know that everybody is on the same page as me as a teacher and they can teach them, and it frees me up to go do something else. It only enhances an attention to detail with the more capable coaches that you have is if you trust them. Like that might be kind of the theme, if you will, of having so many guys with such good resumes across the board, right? Where you can you can free yourself up to do some other things because you trust other guys.
Yeah, I think that for guys like Terry Braden and maybe Addison Williams, I mean, Addison Williams he's been a coordinator, and he's got
he's a bright guy too.
Yeah, and he's got John Butler as his DC, who was the secondary coach last year, and he's got Phil Snow as the associate head coach, who works primarily with the defense and says he's been spending most of his time with the secondary. I would think there would be the possibility that Addison Williams could like come to practice one day and be like, all right, what, who's running the DBs here? Or if you're Glenn Thomas and you coach the quarterbacks, but Dana Holgerson's specialty is working with quarterbacks, and he spends a lot of time with your top guy, Dylan Rhule. Like Glenn Thomas could wonder, like, what do I do here in this operation? Same thing with Braden, same thing with some other coaches. We could go through the list. Like, as long as those guys look at that as the reality is, like, they're living in a world where they have tons of support, and maybe in comparison to the way that college football worked, like as recently as like 3 or 4 years ago, you don't have as much like of the nitty gritty on your plate. Like, there are people there to help you, as long as they all like recognize that and are willing to embrace that these bigger staffs now and the method with which a program like Nebraska goes about attacking individual positions, like that's evolved, then they're good. Like basically, if they're not selfish in the way that they go about doing their jobs, and like, I don't think assistant coaches generally are, like, they don't usually get a lot of the credit anyway. It's just gone to a whole new level now because there's so many more people around with this Nebraska operation. Like, then everything's fine. Like, Terry Braden is a first year college assistant coach. I think he probably could use a lot of what Matt Rhule, as a former D-line coach himself, or Phil Snow or Phil Simpson, like what those guys have to add. Like in a former in a system of like 10 years ago, like you throw him out there and he might be swimming right now because there was so much that was going on, not to mention like the recruiting responsibilities that you have that exist 12 months out of the year. Like, now comparatively, he can really focus on the things that he wants to. Braden can, and like that should be a good thing.
Mitch, it's funny you bring up Braden. Obviously, I think it was Coach Snow yesterday talked about sort of his role and how he's kind of got the hardest job on the staff because Matt Rhule's D-line back, things like that. And did you get at all a sense of sort of some of the dynamics at play? We heard Coach Snow for the first time really kind of talk about where he's spending his time. Obviously, we hear from Coach Rhule and kind of where he spends his time a lot of the time. We've heard a lot coming into this about, so many cooks in the kitchen and things like that. Have you started to get a better sense for who does what and who goes where and how that dynamic's all working?
At practice, I have. I'm curious to see what that looks like on Saturday, like what Phil Snow's doing, or on Thursday night in 2 weeks, what Phil Snow's doing during the game. And we won't know. We won't hear the conversations on the headset. That'd be great if we could, but we won't. Like, how Matt Rhule's input in a game, now that, and he had Dana for 4 games last year, but like how that has evolved over the last 12 months. I definitely have a sense of how that breaks down in practice, and some of that is from being out there at practice yesterday and just like keeping an eye on the coaches who are at the top of the food chain. Rhule doesn't get his hands dirty a lot at practice. Like he's in a place, and he's talked about this, but you actually see it when you go out there, and I'm sure you've seen it, Damon. He's kind of on the side. I mean, is there ever a time where he blows his whistle and stops practice and like chews somebody out or makes a correction or offers praise? Absolutely. But for the most part,
Oh yeah,
he's in the background. Like he's over on the sideline observing and taking in the whole picture. Like it's not something that he was able to do as much
So
in years 1 and 2. Correct me if I'm wrong.
so one thing I really like though, Mitch, and he's really good at this, is if he wants to interject something on an individual level, like let's say he's watching D line and it's during a transition. Like he can go over to Keona or RVP or Hofkin or somebody. He can put his arm around him and he can impart whatever it is that he wants, or he can pull a guy out of a linebacking drill if he wants and say, hey, listen, V9 with your hands when you see like I like the fact that he can put his personality and his like mental toughness or fundamentals or whatever it is anytime he wants to, because I think he's secure in his role. That's actually, I think, going to be a really, really good thing. Like he can go over to Isaiah Hunter and say, listen, this is hypothetical, but you see how hard Barney practices. If you want to go from this to this is the level. Like I like the fact that he can do those kinds of things with his personality, because that's really what they need from him. They if they start thinking and acting like he attacks life, they're going to be just fine.
It's funny, he does pick and choose his moments, and like as an example that I'll point to from Tuesday in practice, there were he called over like a small group of us in the media in the middle of a drill just to kind of chit chat with us, and he's watching the drill with one eye and having a conversation about whatever it might be. Like it might not even been related to football at some points in the conversation. Like he's just shooting the bull, and he sees something in the drill. There was a defensive lineman who didn't make an aggressive enough move on a pitch to a running back where Rhule thought that the D lineman could have got his hand in there and like knocked the ball away and created a turnover. And instantly, like snap of a finger, his attention goes to that play. So he can be and he calls that guy out in a way that like the player absolutely knows that the head coach was watching. So he can be in the background on the sideline, like kind of doing his CEO thing and not like in the mud of the practice. But when he sees something that needs his attention, he has the ability to immediately make his presence known. And that's that's kind of what I saw up close on Tuesday.
Yeah, and he can even do it with the coaches. If he doesn't like the tempo of practice or transition or whatever, you best believe that whistle's blowing. They're going to meet as adults, and he's going to reestablish what it is that he's after. Like I don't ever leave that deal like, you know what, his DNA and fingerprints are all over that thing, even as a CEO. And it's more about his temperament and attacking style, right? Like he can't. I think there's just no chill.
I think when he takes on that role where he can step back and look at it from a larger perspective, it actually allows him to impact things that are important even more, because
that's
he's kind of
that's what I'm hoping happens on game.
Because he's not in the weeds. He's not in the weeds with like a defensive line drill or an offensive line drill. Like he's looking at the big picture, and when he sees something that needs his attention, he's on it immediately.
Mitch, I wonder sometimes with kind of, I guess, delegating more is the way I would put it, and having this ability to step back and focus on some other things. Like there's a certain point where it's, and maybe for Coach Rhule's personality, this isn't the case. There's a certain part of me that thinks it might be harder because you have to get so many more hires right.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Like,
he's pretty good at that, though.
Right. And that's why I said maybe it fits his personality because, like, maybe that's his strength. But I feel like for a lot of coaches, this would be this setup would be a real struggle. A, because they're not great delegators and they have a hard time letting go of control. But also B, if you're not really good as a, I guess, coaching talent evaluator, like an evaluator of other coaches, like this could be a nightmare scenario if you don't get most of these hires right.
Yeah. There's some
guys
things that,
as of late that he hasn't had.
He doesn't have the relationships with like a Terry Braden or a Mosey,
right.
or
Right.
Sports or whoever, right?
Right. Yeah, he's shown. I think that was a question coming in at Nebraska, like how good is Matt Rhule at finding pieces for his staff among like the college football coaching circle at large, like in coaches that he hasn't worked with, because you saw a lot of his Carolina staff, not all of it, but you saw a lot of those coaches just kind of move from one stop to the next with him. And so when he had this opportunity at Nebraska to build a staff that needed to have pieces as a part of it that were not like from his background, it started with Tony White. Although, there was a long ago, there was a connection. Like I shouldn't say there was no connection, but like, if you'd have drawn up like, hey, who's Matt Rhule going to hire as his defensive coordinator at Nebraska in year one if Phil Snow isn't ready to come do that, like Tony White would have been way down the list. Like you had to dig deep into his background. So I consider Tony White to be like an outside of the comfort zone hire for Matt Rhule. And like he smashed that one. Like he hit that one out of the park. Like I have not enjoyed like some of the revisionist history that we've heard in the last few months about Tony White and like maybe how it was a good breakup for Nebraska. No.
It's crazy. That guy's pretty good
listen, I talked to Tony after he got to Florida State, and he was working on a new deal, like a multi-year extension with Nebraska when the offer came from Mike Norvell. And Tony had some reasons why he wanted his family to be in Florida. Whatever, we're not going to relitigate all of that, but Nebraska was not pushing him out the door. That was an excellent hire, and it would have been great for Nebraska to have him back for another year. Now they're in good hands with John Butler. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. Like they're all good situations. But I got off topic. But to your point, yeah, like he's really good. I think Matt Rhule is really good. John Butler is another guy who was kind of and he also had some long ago connections to Nebraska. Mosey, no connections to Nebraska. Been one of the most important hires that Matt Rhule has made.
There's something about
there's others too.
I absolutely love about Caleb. I kind of know what it is. I think it's the father-son relationship and the ability to coach, but his ability to impart wisdom and kind of invest in how the players gravitate towards it. I have from afar, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Coach Mosey.
You know that when Matt Rhule hired Joey McGuire, he was like 45 years old. And that was about 10 years ago. And you look at Mosey, and he came from a successful high school, just like Joey McGuire did in Texas. And Mosey was like 43, 44.
Don't think I'm not paying attention to the story.
When he got hired on staff by Rhule, like where might he be? Where might Jamar be in 6 to 8 years from now? Like if you look at the path of Joey McGuire, it is not unrealistic to expect that Mosey is going to follow something similar. He could be the next head coach at Nebraska. I mean, like we're probably jumping a few leaps there. We're jumping a few cycles ahead, and I say that somewhat in jest, but like I think that's the kind of trajectory that you're going to see for a guy like that who has that much ability to connect with players. And that's an illustration right there of what Matt Rhule can see in a high school coach, or hey, it can be the head of nutrition at the University of South Carolina who came recommended by the offensive coordinator, and it takes one meeting with Matt Rhule to realize that this is a person that he absolutely has to have on his staff. And you look at the results a couple of years later, and say, and people out in the public might not recognize this, but what is the impact of that person on the program as a whole? I'd argue it's like in the top 2 or 3 of anybody who's on the entire staff.
I joked. He told me one time if the place caught fire, he said, no disrespect to anybody else. I love them all, but I'm leaving there with 2 people for sure, and it's Coggins and it's Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Everybody else better figure out room temp and the best escape hatch. Like, and that story is incredible. Oh, and I forgot you had the sit down with her, so you get it, right? Like,
oh yeah,
what that process looked like.
Oh yeah, a tremendous amount of admiration for what she does in that building. I saw her at practice yesterday, and she's got the it factor for sure.
Yeah, she gets a couple of nicknames, and it's all good. She does not mess around at all.
And look what she's got the coach doing.
Yeah. Oh, how about almost all of them now? It's like there's this there's this internal
competition
where nobody's going to get fat shamed around that place. That's for darn sure.
Yeah, she knows. That Kristen has a hand in that.
Let me ask you about the competition you see brewing at offensive line. Right, we had all these kind of thought processes, and then we're actually kind of watching it play out. It's forcing us to kind of take a step back, like, oh. And the one thing that I think is really positive, well, there's 2, and they're connected. Number 1, NIL is important, but may not be as directly tied to your role playing as we may think. Number 2, we forget we bench Sims, right? We ate that money. Number 2, Teddy may be very healthy. Kanak may be pretty good. Gatula must have had a really good offseason coming back lifting after the surgery. Like, there's so many positives if you look at it that way about the battles that are going on along the perimeter of the offensive line.
They're definitely at a place on the O-line where they're motivating each other. And that's like ultimately, I'm sure, what Donovan Raiola would say was his goal from day one was to get it to a place where they're all making each other better. And yeah, he's still going to be the at the head of it and pushing and like doing his thing where he yells and man, he gets animated in practice for sure. But like the reason that Gunnar Gatula had a great offseason is probably more because he's in there with Teddy, or he's in there with Tyler Kanak, or he's busting his butt alongside Justin Evans, who's another guy who I think has had an incredible like last 9 months, or Lutovsky, who has reshaped some stuff with how he looks. Like he's, what's his body fat percentage? Like
he looks amazing.
8. I mean, it's more than that.
That's super. But Vegas, didn't it? I was like, how does a big guy like that get a tapered look?
Right. So they're at a place now where it's like a cycle where they're all making each other better. So yeah, it was really interesting to hear Troy Dannon. Like that's maybe the one thing that sticks with me the most that he said on Friday last week is about how they're going to have conversations with every coach whose team gets revenue sharing dollars at the end of each season about what the return on investment was for those players. And that can be a little bit scary because sometimes you bring somebody in and you have to invest a lot in order to get them out of the portal or as a high school recruit, but they're not like a 1-year thing. Like I'll use Williams Winery as an example. Probably not. Like he's definitely not going to be at like the best that he possibly can at any point in 2025. But what if he's an All-American in 2027 and a first-round pick? Like when you have that conversation at the end of the year this season about the ROI for him, you don't know. Like you can say, the coach can sit down and say, be patient, give us time. Like he's going to be great. But it's not just him. Like there's other players like that too, and that factors in with with Elijah Pritchett as he goes through this process in the battle for the left tackle job with Gunnar Gatula, who undeniably they have a bigger investment monetarily in Pritchett that transferred from Alabama than they do with Gunnar Gatula, who's a third-year sophomore from Lincoln Southeast. But like that should not factor. And like if you get to a place where it's becoming a big part or really any part of the decision about who starts, because you're thinking about, oh, we got to have this conversation in December about ROI. Like that's why it was so enlightening to me and interesting. And like, I thought it was notable that Dannon chose to say that. Like I would almost think as an AD, like you would have that in your mind, but you might not divulge that publicly, that you're going to have these conversations, but he did, and he was transparent, and that's great. I just, I don't know. It'll play out, and we'll see over the course of probably multiple seasons, like how that kind of stuff impacts decisions that are made this time of year.
I can't tell you how important it is too, as a team that's trying to accrue depth, which is going to be hard in college football if your culture isn't built to handle it, where guys need to be motivated knowing they've got an opportunity that isn't based on dollars. It absolutely needs to be able to make sense.
Yeah, right.
Like,
right.
It's going to be crucial. And for whatever the reason, so far, Nebraska's been able to pull it off. And I think a lot of it has to do with Mitch, and tell me what you think. I love the fact, and I kind of said this before, you want Nebraska recruiting the way that they're recruiting, right? They've carried themselves like a top 20 program. They don't just throw money at it. There's long talks that you have to have with Spindlers and Pritchett's and guys like that to make sure that they aren't disruptive, that everybody's on the same page. And yeah, you may miss out on some Sanders and some Bakers, right? Those guys are starting at their respective schools. But in the long run, it's how you want Nebraska spending their resources and evaluating who actually wants to be in Lincoln that isn't revenue driven.
I think part of the reason that they've had success and like that they've developed a culture in this first year of rev share, and like as NIL has really come to represent such an important aspect of every major college program, is because the one player at the top of the food chain who makes the most money does not act like he's entitled. And I think it has an effect on the rest of the roster, where if you're coming in as a big time transfer, or you're a freshman in this class of 2025, and you come on campus and you go into that locker room and you see that the player who acts the least like things are owed to him and wants to constantly give back within the team and within the community is the starting quarterback, who was the former 5-star signee. Like, just the tone that he sets allows like everyone else to just fall in line behind him. And that's great for Nebraska that they have that with Dylan Raiola. It's not always going to exist that way. Like, he is a unique case for sure. In part because of his personality and how he was raised. And in part just for all the reasons that he came to Nebraska. So in years ahead, when that dynamic changes and he's not there, 2 years down the road, and you have somebody else at the top, like this is probably something that they can learn from this. Like, you better hope that the guy who's like the face of your program, that he's given off the vibes within the team and outside of the team that you want everybody else to emulate. Like they kind of fell into it with Dylan, and he's a great first guy to have as the one who's leading the way. But I don't know if, like, looking in from the outside, if we all realize like how fortunate Nebraska is to have him in that spot, because it matters, I think, to all of the players who are coming in behind him.
That's our guy, Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, we appreciate the time as always. We'll talk to you soon.
Good stuff, Mitch.
All right. Thanks, guys.